A marriage that began as nothing more than a cold contract, a cruel wager between pride and convenience. He was a man betrayed by the woman he loved most. She was a young woman treated as a bargaining chip in an unfair fate. Neither of them believed in love. Neither of them expected redemption. But what was born out of pain grew into something greater. Amid power games, betrayals, and conspiracies, a truth no one could foresee emerged. The quiet strength of kindness, strong enough to change even the hardest heart. And when everything seemed lost, love proved to be stronger than pain. In the penthouse lit only by the city lights, Alexander Hayes stood by the window, as if searching the horizon for answers. A glass of whiskey rested firmly in his hand, but nothing could erase the memory that tore him apart. On the floor, scattered among shards of glass, lay a broken picture frame. Samantha's smile still looked alive in the photograph, but to him, it was now just a ghost. She had never been just any woman. She was the woman he loved. And it was because of her that the blow had been the cruelest. He had built his empire on his own, brick by brick, with no inheritance, no shortcuts. He had earned respect and wealth. But when he thought he had finally found safe harbor in Samantha, life proved merciless. She hadn't simply left. She had betrayed him in the arms of his greatest rival, on a night forever seared into his memory. He could still hear her voice, cold and sharp. "This is just business, Alex." But to him, it had never been business. It had been love. And that love had been turned into poison. The hours dragged on. The clock seemed to mock his pain. Over and over, Alexander whispered to himself, "I'll never need anyone again." The mirror reflected a flawless image back at him. The tailored suit, the upright posture, the unshakable expression. But behind that mask stood a broken man. The weight of rejection had turned him into ice. Redemption, healing, reconnecting with his feelings. All of it felt too far away, almost out of reach. Then fate knocked at his door in the form of a golden envelope, resting on the table. The gala at the Waldorf Astoria promised to be just another night of appearances. "It's not my world," he muttered over the phone, trying to refuse Daniel's invitation. But his friend's challenge came back firm. "Then prove you feel nothing." Alexander drew a long breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, he chose to put on the suit as if he were donning armor. The elevator doors opened, revealing a ballroom of gold and crystal. The sound of the orchestra, the hum of voices, the cautious stares. He walked in carrying nothing but the vow to remain unshaken. But fate is clever. It is precisely when we swear we'll never love again that life puts us to the test. And that night, among hundreds of strangers, an unexpected gaze was already waiting ready to shatter the wall he had sworn would never fall again. The ballroom at the Waldorf Astoria looked like a scene from another world. Crystal chandeliers cast golden reflections, and every table was a stage for rehearsed smiles. Alexander moved among the crowd like a stranger in a theater, greeting people politely but coldly, never letting anything slip through. His suit served as a shield, his distant gaze as a fortress. He had no idea that, on this very night, something would happen to test his icy composure. At the center of the room, Emily Carter drew every eye. A red dress like fire, confident steps, a rebellious smile that defied etiquette. Her name was whispered across the room, some with admiration, others with disdain. The untamable one, they called her behind her back. She drank champagne with insolence, laughed out loud, ignoring the rules of this world of masks. Hers was the kind of presence that disturbed and fascinated all at once. It was Daniel who brought them together. "Alexander, you need to meet Emily," he said, almost in a teasing tone. Their eyes met like a spark of electricity, his cold and calculating, hers bold and mocking. "So this is the famous Hayes?" Emily said, arching a brow with irony. The silence between them felt louder than the music filling the hall. Alexander realized she wasn't afraid of him. Moments later, between laughter and teasing, Daniel made his challenge. "Give me 3 months, and I'll turn Emily into a perfect lady." Alexander almost smiled, but held it back. Emily laughed even louder. "I'd rather be wild 1,000 times over than be perfect," she shot back, meeting Alexander's eyes as if daring him to break through his armor. It was a game, but neither of them knew just how much this game would change their lives. That very night, amid curious stares, an unexpected proposal surfaced. Emily would agree to marry Alexander not for love, but to escape the fate that bound her, an arranged marriage to a man twice her age. He, driven by pride, would sign the contract out of convenience. The ballroom kept glittering, but right there, between two clashing souls, began a story of sacrifice, discovery, and redemption no one could have predicted. The wedding day arrived, wrapped in luxury and coldness. The cathedral was draped in white flowers, the guests were calculated smiles, and every click of the cameras captured a performance without a soul. Alexander, flawless in his dark suit, kept his gaze distant. Emily, stunning in lace, walked the aisle like a trophy on display. The music played solemnly, but between them reigned a frozen silence. The vows were spoken like obligations. No promises came from the heart, only from the contract that bound them. Alexander held his rigid stance, indifferent to the curious stares. Emily, proud and unyielding, faced the future without lowering her eyes, even if deep inside she felt like a chess piece. "Smile, darling, everyone is watching," someone whispered, but her smile carried more defiance than tenderness. It was a marriage sealed by pride and convenience. At the reception, the sparkle of champagne glasses could not hide the weight of the farce. Emily was seen as a precious ornament, a prize to be shown off. "A decorative trophy," the women whispered. Alexander, on the other hand, was described as manipulative, cold, incapable of feeling. And though every word stung, neither of them allowed themselves to show weakness. Both played the game to the end, prisoners of appearances. On their wedding night, the silence was almost unbearable. Alexander expected to find the same defiant rebellion he had seen at the ballroom, but instead, he was met with an unexpected revelation. "I've never been with anyone," Emily said, her voice steady, but her eyes carrying a spark of vulnerability. He looked at her, speechless, caught between disbelief and respect. For a moment, the mask of ice seemed to crack. What was supposed to be nothing more than a contract proved far more complex. That night, both realized the game would be more dangerous than they had imagined. It was not only a matter of convenience, but of secrets, wounds, and hidden truths. And what began as a loveless pact already carried a quiet promise to change everything. The Hayes mansion rose in all its grandeur, surrounded by carefully kept gardens. From the outside, a golden palace. Inside, a silent prison. Emily walked through the marble halls like a bird in a gilded cage. Each step echoed with loneliness. The staff watched her with respect, but also with distance, and she felt the weight of constant surveillance. For all its splendor, the house gave her no freedom. Alexander kept to his rigid routine: meetings, business, travel. To him, the mansion was merely an extension of his empire. To Emily, it was a golden cage. Yet she refused to be broken. At formal dinners, she stirred whispers with her bold behavior, laughter too loud, words too sharp, glances too daring. Alexander stared at her with coldness, but deep down, every challenge awakened something he would not admit. What no one saw was Emily's hidden side. On afternoons when she slipped away from the staff's eyes, she visited the poorer quarters of the city. She gave away clothes, delivered food, helped strangers. Back at the mansion, she wrote letters with no recipient, as if to lighten her soul. To outsiders, she was a rebellious socialite. To the unseen, she was an unexpected light. Alexander began to notice. One employee confided, "She paid for my son's surgery, but asked me not to tell anyone." Another mentioned mysterious donations signed under no name. Little by little, the cold businessman discovered that Emily carried more kindness than vanity. Each of her gestures was like a crack in his wall. Why would she do it in silence? He wandered through sleepless nights, and the more he observed, the more the image of Samantha, the betrayal, the poison, the calculation faded into the distance. Emily, the same woman who defied etiquette with insolence, revealed the quiet strength of kindness. She was a paradox that unsettled him, and without realizing it, Alexander no longer saw her as a prisoner of convenience, but as an enigma that began to stir his heart. Mornings at the mansion began to change in small ways. Alexander, once accustomed to a cold silence, started to notice Emily's subtle gestures. The way she cared for the flowers in the garden, the way she smiled at the staff, even the way she looked at the horizon, as if searching for a home she had never known. He, who once saw her as a burden or a provocation, began to notice something different. Breakfasts, once formal and distant, slowly became less hostile. "Did you sleep well?" Alexander asked one morning, surprising even himself. Emily lifted her eyes, suspicious, but answered with honesty, "Enough to dream." The words lingered between them, like a secret code. It was only a simple exchange, but it opened a space for something new, almost imperceptible. On a stormy night, as thunder split the sky, Emily revealed a fragment of her pain. She spoke of her stepmother, of loneliness, of the feeling of being used as currency. Alexander listened in silence, never interrupting. When he finally spoke, he confessed the weight he carried: Samantha's betrayal, the wound still open, the fear of trusting again. The room seemed to shrink, as if the whole world existed inside that conversation. Their talks multiplied, not always deep, sometimes just exchanges about books, childhood memories, or forgotten dreams. But in every word, there was a quiet closeness. Alexander, used to controlling everything, found himself vulnerable before Emily's sincerity, and she, who always armed herself with irony, began to lower her defenses. It was a fragile balance, but a real one. What grew between them was not sudden passion, but a delicate respect, almost shy. A love that sprouted from respect and mutual discovery, like seeds planted in barren soil. There were still hurts, wounds, and mistrust, but there was also something new: hope. And that invisible thread began to tie them together, even if neither dared to admit it. The calm would not last. Behind the scenes of their story, two shadows were already plotting against them: Emily's stepmother, driven by envy and bitterness, and Samantha, the woman who had once destroyed Alexander, secretly joined forces. They met in discreet salons, trading venomous glances and calculated plans. "She doesn't deserve this life," whispered the stepmother. Samantha smiled coldly, "And he doesn't deserve peace." The first strike was psychological. Old photos of Alexander and Samantha slipped into the wrong hands until they reached Emily. Records of dinners, trips, shared smiles. When she saw them, Emily felt her heart sink. "Does he still love her?" she whispered, clutching the images with trembling hands. The poison of doubt began to corrode the fragile trust that had started to bloom. Alexander, unaware of the conspiracy, didn't see the abyss opening before him. Nights turned cold once more. Emily avoided Alexander's gaze, answered with short phrases, hid her tears. He felt the distance, but couldn't understand why. "What's wrong?" he asked once, receiving only silence. The emptiness between them grew again, as if all their efforts had been for nothing. It was the reopening of a wound that had never healed. Meanwhile, Samantha tightened her grip on the game. She used blackmail, documents, veiled threats. "If you don't listen to me, I'll destroy your company," she said in a tense meeting. There was money, power, and even physical danger involved. Alexander, hardened by years of battles, tried to resist, but the ghost of the past now threatened to swallow the present. Each step felt heavier, each decision more dangerous. The mansion, once a stage for their fragile closeness, became again a place of silence and mistrust. Emily felt betrayed, Alexander felt cornered, and their enemies moved in the shadows, relentless. It was as if fate itself were testing the strength of a love still in its infancy. And in Emily's heart, A painful question beat with every breath. How far can kindness and trust endure when the past returns to destroy everything? Mornings at the mansion grew more and more tense. Emily walked the corridors, carrying the weight of doubts that left her breathless. The images of Alexander with Samantha still burned in her mind, and his silence only deepened her anguish. Until one afternoon, as she passed near the office wing, she overheard two maids whispering, "He's fighting alone to save the company. He doesn't sleep. He barely eats." Emily stopped, her heart racing. Curious, she began to watch more closely. Alexander spent entire nights in meetings, his eyes tired, his shoulders heavy, papers scattered, endless phone calls, doors closing into the silence of dawn. He said nothing, asked no one for help, simply carried the weight as he always had. For the first time, Emily saw beyond the cold mask. She saw a man exhausted, standing on the edge of collapse, and it touched her in a way she hadn't expected. That night, alone in her room, Emily opened an old box. Inside lay the inheritance her mother had left her untouched, kept for something that truly mattered. Tears slipped down her face as she made her decision. "This is for him," she whispered, signing the papers that would make her the secret investor. The gesture was not just financial, it was a silent choice to stand by him, even if she was never acknowledged. She told no one, not even Alexander. She chose instead to remain invisible, a quiet shadow holding up his empire when he needed it most. "May he never know. May he only keep standing," she murmured to the mirror. Her decision came not from pride, but from love. A love that was born in silence, far from watchful eyes and appearances. And so, while Alexander believed he was fighting alone to keep his world from crumbling, Emily had already become his hidden strength. The woman he thought reckless and scandalous was, in truth, the silent guardian of his survival. But secrets have weight, and this one was destined to come to light in the most painful way. The night was damp, and the road stretched endlessly ahead. Emily drove alone, returning from a discreet visit to the orphanage she supported in secret. The headlights traced the wet asphalt when suddenly, a black car appeared in her rearview mirror, fast and menacing. Her heart leapt. The shrill sound of the horn pierced the silence of the night. The crash was inevitable. The impact hurled Emily's car into the iron barrier. The world spun in flashes of light and pain. Hours later, Alexander received the news like a knife to the chest. She was in an accident, the doctor said gravely. By the bedside, Emily lay motionless, tubes and machines breathing for her. The cold businessman, the man of iron, broke for the very first time. He held her hand cold and pale and whispered, "Don't leave me too." The silence of the room was a scream tearing through his soul. While Emily fought in a coma, the truth surfaced like a shock. Documents were found. The mysterious investor who had saved his company wasn't a stranger. It was her. Emily Carter, the woman he had judged as reckless and unpredictable, had used her inheritance to sustain him without ever asking for recognition. Alexander felt the ground vanish beneath him. The pride that had always guided him now seemed absurd in the face of such silent loyalty. Overcome by fury and long-suppressed love, Alexander investigated the accident. The trail led to Samantha, the same woman who had once shattered his life. But this time, she had gone beyond betrayal. She had plotted Emily's death. The evidence was clear, and the police were called. Samantha, arrogant until the end, was handed over to the authorities. Yet no external justice could erase the weight of guilt Alexander carried. When he returned to the hospital, Alexander knelt by Emily's side. He looked at her, so fragile, and let words escape that he had never dared to speak. "I don't deserve what you did, but I need you. I need your love." Tears streamed down his face, and in that instant, all the ice within him melted. What had begun as a game was now the truest battle of his life. Not to lose the only woman he had chosen to love again. The days in the hospital were long and silent. Alexander spent hours at her bedside, watching the monitors flicker as if each beat were a plea. He spoke even without a response, sharing secrets, memories, fears, Come back to me, Emily. Don't let me fight alone. His broken voice filled the sterile room, every word a hidden prayer. On the morning, her eyes finally opened. The world seemed to stop. Emily blinked slowly, confused, and met Alexander's desperate gaze. He gripped her hand tightly, as if afraid she would vanish again. You came back. Thank God, he murmured, tears falling without shame. Weak, Emily whispered. Did you cry for me? He only smiled, unable to hide both the pain and the relief. In the days that followed, recovery was slow but filled with rediscovery. Between bandages and tests, deep conversations emerged. Alexander confessed his mistakes, his coldness, the weight of his mistrust. Emily revealed the reason for her silence, the choice to help him without expecting anything in return. I wanted to be your strength without you noticing, because I believed in you. Her words echoed like a revelation that changed everything. It was on a rainy afternoon that Alexander finally gathered the courage. With no contract, no pride, only his heart laid bare, he leaned closer and said, "Marry me, not for convenience, not for appearances, but because I love you." Emily closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. When she answered, her voice was soft but firm. Yes. Now, yes. It was the rebirth of something that had once seemed impossible. The hospital, once a stage of pain, became a place of reconciliation. The cold businessman set aside his armor, and the rebellious socialite revealed her courage. The love that was born there was different, deep, genuine, true. It was not about contracts or games, but about redemption and growth. And for the first time, Alexander felt that he was not only regaining Emily, but also reclaiming himself. Months later, the Hayes mansion was no longer a prison, but a home filled with light. Emily walked through its halls with ease, turning every corner into a refuge of hope. She was the one who organized a grand charity event, gathering people who had once judged her. Dressed in white, simple yet elegant, she spoke about compassion, about the quiet strength of kindness. The audience listened in silence, moved. At the back, Alexander watched with pride. The cameras captured every detail, but nothing was as striking as the way he looked at her. Alexander was no longer the cold, calculating businessman, but a man transformed. Love had rebuilt what pain had once destroyed. When Emily finished her speech, applause filled the hall. Alexander walked toward her, through the crowd, as if the entire world had disappeared around them. In the garden of the mansion, beneath the sky scattered with stars, Alexander took Emily's hand. There were no witnesses, no contracts, no rules. Only the two of them. He drew a deep breath, his voice heavy with emotion. "Emily, I want to start again. Not like before, but for real. Marry me, for love." She smiled, tears shining in her eyes, and answered with the certainty of someone who no longer doubted. Yes, now and forever. The kiss that sealed that promise was unlike any other. It was not fleeting passion, nor pride defeated. It was redemption. It was the healing of wounds, the rediscovery of feeling, the proof that love can grow out of respect and mutual discovery. They were no longer bound by a game, but united by choice. And life itself seemed to grant them a second chance. As the stars lit the night sky, the couple walked hand in hand, ready to write a new chapter. The past, marked by pain and betrayal, was left behind. The present, at last, belonged to them, and the future promised to be built on trust, sacrifice, and true love. A story that had begun as a farce, but ended in redemption. In the end, what seemed like nothing more than a game of appearances turned into a story of redemption. Alexander and Emily discovered that true love is not born of contracts, but of respect, sacrifice, and courage. Her kindness broke down his walls. His pain revealed her strength. Together, they proved that even the deepest wounds can be transformed into hope. And you? Do you believe love can be born where least expected? Have you ever lived a moment when someone's kindness completely changed your life? Or perhaps you've felt pain turn into strength? These questions are not just about them. They are about all of us. Because in the end, There is always a choice to remain imprisoned by the past or to allow the heart to find a new beginning. This story reminds us that no matter how much others may try to destroy, kindness always wins. Always. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Many more moving stories are yet to come, and I want you here to experience each one with me.